This word understanding. Okay? We don't understand it.
Okay. Flee.
Okay. To understand means to stand under or to become subject to. Right? So if I understand, then I stand under. That means I am a subject or become subject to that which I have acknowledged as my prince. Right? Daniel goes through these visions. He doesn't understand. He doesn't understand. But then he finally understands. And then God says to him, in the last days, you will stand in your place in the last days. You'll stand because you can stand under that which you know, which is the principles. If I don't understand, then I'm wicked, and I'm not standing under these principles. I'm standing under something else, which I don't even know what I'm standing under because it's a myth. Right? So understanding has to do with the restoration of our minds. So I understand principles, and then I can choose which prince that I become subject to. And when that happens, now I have understanding. If that has not happened, I do not have understanding. I don't care how much information you know. It's not about information, whether that information is right or not. That's not what saves you. Does that make sense? So this is really connected to the Daniel 10, but this is most of what the Bible says. The language that it uses is so simplistic, yet it's so profound that we don't get it. We just go right over it, and we try. So many times we make it more complicated than it needs to be. It's not that hard. The hard is a comfort level term, right? So it's the reason that our comfort level drops is the reason why we don't get things. Because we don't want to get it, because to get it means I would be in touch with reality and my comfort level would drop, and that's what I don't want. Does that make sense? So anyway, that's Psalm 31. And you can see throughout the Bible will talk about these vain imaginings or making reality of Jude calls us dreamers. He says they're dreamers. What's it? Let me read Jude here. I mean, this is all over the place. You can go anywhere, right? I was going to actually go to Isaiah 28, but you can go to Peter. Let me read Jude as I mentioned it. Jude 1:8.
So when you're doing positive projection or negative projection, either one is not reality.
That's right. You're not supposed to be projecting. You're supposed to be listening, gathering information, thinking, reasoning from the information based on principles, and then making a choice.
That's why you were trying to teach us to stay in reality, because God is always in the present, and to stay connected with God, you have to be in reality.
That's right. And that's where in Jude, right? Jude is the one who keeps saying, keep yourself in the love of God. If you step outside the love of God, you're a dreamer. You're playing games. Jude uses this deny, recreating, performing thing all the time. He talks about, most of what he talks about is denying, recreating, performing. And you can see that. I mean, verse 4, he actually uses the word denying. But, so he says in verse 8, likewise also these filthy dreamers, they defile the flesh. What is that? That's performing.
What? Oh, okay.
They despise dominion. What is that?
Authority?
That's denying. What dominion are they despising? God. And they speak evil of dignitaries. What is that? Well, that's recreating reality. So James is saying that these dreamers, they're a myth. They're denying, they're recreating, and they're performing. By the way, if you are denying, recreating, and performing, then you are a dreamer. You're a myth. You're not in touch with reality. You can't be in touch with reality. By the way, if you are performing, then you are denying and recreating. And I don't care if you can't figure it out. It doesn't matter. The fact you are performing is the fact that you are doing these two. This does not happen on its own. So if you're performing for support, then you are in denial and you are recreating a reality around yourself. And you are lying to yourself. You are. So that's why God talks, so much of religion we talked about yesterday, focuses on behaviors. Well, the reason it focuses on behavior is because you're talking to brain dead people who don't get it until they see themselves do or say something that's so atrocious they realize, oh, that's not what Jesus is like. Something must be wrong with me. And God's saying, yeah, well, I'm glad you're waking up. What's wrong? So now I got to start reasoning from what I did to what's going on inside me. And I start realizing, oh, I thought it was okay, but now I realize that I'm not okay. And so he reasons back from my behavior then to my character, and he says, oh, you think you understand it now because you see your character? Well, let me show you something you're willing to see something even worse.
Your nature.
And then he shows you your nature.
Oh.
And you realize, oh, there's nothing good in me. I'm a total mess. Well, that's bad news. No, that's good news. Right? Because now I see I'm a total mess. Now what?
Help. Change that.
Now I can be saved. Now I can be converted. This is
the Laodicean church. He says you don't see. They think they have no need. They don't know their actual condition. They have no need.
That's right. So conversion, and this is critical. Conversion. When you're baptized into the death of Christ. So you're baptized into his death, and then you partake of his resurrection, which means you have a new life. If you have not passed from death to life, you are not converted. And I don't care what doctrines you say you accept. Mm-hmm. Oh, I go to church the right day, and I believe to say that has nothing to do with what I'm talking about.
I pay tithe.
And that's right. In Romans chapter 6, baptism is when I pass from death, functioning by comfort level, to life, functioning by principles. If you have not made that step, you're lost. You're not converted, and you need to be changed. You need to be saved. This is what happens to when Peter finally gets it after he denies Christ. He's converted. Now he followed Jesus for 3.5 years. He did miracles. He preached in his name. He did all these things, and then Jesus says that when you're converted, strengthen your brothers. I'm like, what? What kind of slam is that? I thought I was one of your disciples, one of your ministers of the gospel. I did all these things. That doesn't matter. When you're converted, strengthen your brothers. See, that's the facade that goes on. That's the myth that we can play. Religious people are the greatest people at putting on this facade and playing the game. But God isn't playing a game. He's trying to save you.
Amen. Yeah, I'm going to use my daughter as an example because we have Bible studies, and she's a thinker. She's a really good thinker. And she's like, started reading the Bible, and she's like, Dad, we have no hope. I'm like, that's good, because the good news is the gospel. And then we started talking and just started, using that. But she was reading on her own and just looking at it, and she realized that she needed help. And it's like, wow, you're right.
Right.
That's good.
That's right. That's what the Bible is
good news.
supposed to bring us to.
Exactly.
The point of our helplessness, so that we see the fullness of Christ. That's why you realize people are so in love with Jesus and understanding the fullness of Christ. And then all the teachings, all the information that we've accepted, then begins to find its rightful place. It begins to make sense. The stuff that you've accepted as religion isn't necessarily not true. It's just not the truth. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So I'm not speaking against the teachings of the church. No, the point is those don't replace the truth. So you can see in James, and we can spend a lot of time in James. James goes over this denying, recreating a lot. And he talks about them functioning like beasts. That's verse 10. Because they're in denial of things they don't know.
But Jude.
They walk after their own lust, verse 16.
Oh, Jude.
They walk after their own ungodly lust. They're sensual, verse 19. What's neat here is he says, Jesus is coming. Notice he says, behold, the Lord cometh with 10,000 saints to execute judgment upon all and to convict all that are ungodly among them, of all their ungodly deeds which they have committed in all their ungodly speeches which sinners have spoken against him. Why does he do this three-part thing? The three angels' message, and he's exposing their denying, recreating, and performing, and he's dealing with the three parts of them. It all clicks together at one time. He's dealing with their nature, their character, and their behavior. He's dealing with them denying, recreating, and performing, and he's giving them the first and second and third angels' message. All reality is coming into being all at one time, and guess what? They can't handle it. They literally fall apart.
Yeah.
They literally cry for the rocks and mountains to fall on them and hide them from the face of this reality they can't face. There's too much reality at once, and it's blowing my myth apart, and I can't stand this. Well, no, you're not going to stand. You're going to fall. And this is what Enoch was prophesying about, right? That's why they hated Enoch. That's why Noah is telling them about the flood coming. They're not even going to listen to that either, right? So you hear the message of Enoch, and Enoch is proclaiming the three angels' message, and he's talking to people that are in such denial that they don't want to face it. And it gets so bad that God literally has to give the world over to a flood and wipe the earth of them and start again with Noah. That's pretty bad. Why is Jude referencing that?
that's where we're going again.
Because that's where we are again. Exactly. It's exactly where we are again. So, I'm not sure where you want to go from here, but the point is that the Bible talks about how sin blinds our minds so that we can't see. I think of 2 Corinthians 3, when he talks about Moses on the mountain veiling his face. And he uses the idea of Moses veiling his face, remember? And he uses it in terms of the law written on stone versus the Spirit of God, the law written on our hearts. And the old with the veil, and then the new that gives life. And the old with the veil is what? What's the veil?
The separation?
The separation from our heart.
Yeah, that's right. And what do we call that separation?
Sin.
Oh,
The
yeah.
death.
Death. Death is the veil, right? And he actually refers to that, I think it's 2 Corinthians 3 verse 7, he actually talks about death. That's death is the veil. And then the veil that Moses puts on his face that hides the glory that's being done away or is fading away is only a symbol of, if they can't stand in the glory that's fading away, then how are they going to stand in the true glory that's coming, which is life? And he talks about these veils. And then he talks a lot about dying and life and death and dying. This is where he says, I die every day, right? And then he talks about carrying around in our body the dying of the Lord so that the life of the Lord will be lived in our body. Remember this? Remember that discussion? Have I lost you? If you go to 2 Corinthians 3, he talks about it. He tells the whole story.
Well, we have to enter into Jesus' death. So I'm not sure I fully understand that.
Yes, but how do I enter into his death?
Baptism.
By accepting his sacrifice for me.
Right, right. So the point here is that what happens to the old me?
That died.
I die.
Right.
So the point is, if I'm not willing to die, then I can't
Live.
I can't live.
I can't live.
Right.
So right. So the point. So here's.
So really, that's what.
So here's Moses coming down the mountain, right? Now he has the glory of God on his face, right? What do the children of Israel do when they see that?
They
No.
can't look. Right.
They run away.
Right.
Why?
Afraid.
Which,
Because they're afraid.
yeah.
And then they say, "Look, you go talk to Moses. Moses, you go talk to God. If we talk to him, then we will
Die.
We will die." Well, Moses is saying, "That's what's supposed to happen, dummies." Oh no! My comfort level dropped. You go talk. Whatever he tells you to do, we'll do it. And Moses goes, "Okay, whatever."
We enter into Christ. Christ died knowing it was going to hurt, knowing it was going to be difficult, knowing all of it. So we enter into his death knowing it's going to be uncomfortable, knowing it's going to be difficult, and saying, I don't care. I don't care what it feels to
Yeah,
me.
true.
I don't care what it feels like to me. I don't care how much it
about
hurts.
taking up our cross
I'm going
and following
forward.
him,
Right,
right?
right.
Yes, but most of the time we have so fantasized, romanticized it that he's just using a symbol about taking up his cross. No, it's not a symbol.
Yeah.
No, it's you are really going to die, and it's really going to hurt. This isn't a symbol, right?
Right.
So when he tells you that if you take up your cross and if you follow them where he goes, you're going to go through the process he went through, and you are going to literally die. By the way, that's okay because he's the one that gives you life. Right? So this is what's going on in 2 Corinthians 3. Why, by the way, is Paul talking to the Corinthians about this? Well, this is where our very verse comes from that we talked about. What's Paul trying to do?
Isn't he trying to show them that what they're doing that
Yeah.
isn't right?
Right. He just wrote the first letter to them, and what's going on? Well, a guy sleeping with his mother, and they have all kinds of this mess going on in the church.
Can continue it,
Right? And they think, well, Jesus loves me and I'm saved by grace, so it doesn't matter that I'm doing all this foolishness. And Paul's saying, no. No, if you died to sin, then how can you still live in it and claim that you're dead to it?
I think that's one of the ills of today, with these evangelicals who go, I was saved on such and such a day at such and such a time, and now I'm good. Yeah. And they're doing all kinds of ridiculous things and walking away from the Bible.
Right, because they've made, as Jude says, they've made they turned the grace of God into lasciviousness, right?
Yeah.
A license for evil.
Yeah.
That's what Jude is talking about, right? When we just left Jude. So here in Corinthians, he's talking to these people who are playing games with reality in their mind, and they don't know God. And Paul's trying to get them to come over from death into life.
Yeah.
And they think that they're okay already.
No.
So he uses this analogy with Moses on the mountain, and he talks about Moses removing this veil, but the veil is the veil of death. And if they will accept the death of their old nature, then they can become a new creation. And he's going to say that in 2 Corinthians 5, by the time he gets to his argument. If any man is in Christ, he's a new creation. The old is gone, the new has come. Right?
Right.
So you go through the letter, and you're amazed how much Paul talks about death and life in this letter in 2 Corinthians. It's like, Paul, you're a broken record. Why do you keep saying the same thing over and over? And what's Paul's response?
Because you keep doing it.
How come you don't get what I'm saying? No matter how many times I say it, you don't get it.
Yeah.
That's what Paul is saying, right? By the way, and that veil thing reminds me of Isaiah 28, because that's exactly what Isaiah is talking about. He doesn't use the word veil, but he uses the idea of hiding in these refuge of lies. We hide ourselves, we veil ourselves in these refuge of lies. But reality's coming, and what's going to happen to that refuge?
Go away.
So we'll go to Isaiah 28, because he actually talks about the covenant with death, which is just, these guys who wrote this book, I'll tell you, they knew what they were talking about. They encountered God. Isaiah chapter 6, he encounters God, and he doesn't walk away saying, oh, that felt wonderful. No. What did they say when they encountered God?
I'm undone.
Woe unto me, I'm undone. That's right.
I am a man
And they
of
literally
unclean lips.
die. They literally die, and God restores them. So, in Isaiah 28, he starts off talking about Ephraim. You guys there? And then we can go as fast as slow as you like. I'm just trying to help you to see the principle, right? So Ephraim is drunk, which means he's out of touch with reality. He's playing games, right? And he's not listening to God's voice. So he has this crown of pride, the drunkards of Ephraim, verse 3. And the glorious beauty which is on the head of the fat valley shall be a fading flower. So they think that everything's fine. They think they're God's people and God's going to take care of them. Everything's going to be hunky-dory. Just some Sunday keepers are going to chase me around for a little while, but then I'll be fine.
No,
No,
slow down that a little bit. Slow that down a little bit. Go back a little bit. Okay.
I'm in
so,
verse 4.
All right, you're in verse 4, right?
Yeah.
But whatever you
I
just
started with
read
the-
was totally different from what I'm looking at.
Yeah, it starts with Ephraim. He's
The
functioning
crown
on
of pride,
pride,
the drunkards of
and
the
he thinks that he's the chosen of God. Jen will teach you about this, right? Remember, Ephraim was the second son of. Can I explain it to him?
The second son of Joseph.
Yeah, but what? So why is he being talked about here first?
Well, because he was anointed before his older brother.
That's right. So just like Isaac with Jacob and Esau, right? The younger son, the older son was supposed to be the lineage of the Messiah, but he becomes the younger son. Same thing happens to Joseph. So the younger son, which is Ephraim, is chosen as the leader, and Manasseh is not.
That's the trouble. I didn't know that.
Yes.
Okay.
So here Ephraim is functioning on this pride that he's the chosen, and he's going to inherit all this, and because of that he's fat and he's asleep and he's out of touch with reality and he's denying God. And the end result is not going to be good. So then he talks about the spirit of judgment. The Lord is going to come for the crown of beauty. There's a spirit of judgment. Light is going to shine, right? Then he says, but they have also erred through wine and strong drink. And through strong drink are out of the way. The priest and the prophet have erred through strong drink. They have swallowed up wine. They are out of the way through strong drink. They err in vision. They stumble in judgment. So what's he telling them? They're so drunk, they're out of touch with reality, and they don't know the way. What is the way? What way are they out of?
God's
Well, there's only one way, one truth, one life, right? So they're out of God's way, and now they're functioning in this myth based on how things feel to them. So then, of course, he's going to attack some of the things that we don't like, but he's going to talk to them about who is he teaching knowledge to, and who's going to understand the teaching. Well, them that are weaned from milk and drawn from breasts. So then he uses this analogy. For precept must be upon precept, precept upon precept, line upon line, line upon line, here a little, there a little, right? What's he talking about? Why is he repeating himself?
That you have to build on what you know and what God has taught. Is that what it's saying?
Okay. Well, listen what he says. From with stammering lips and another tongue, he speak to these people, to whom he said, "This is the rest, wherewith you may cause the weary to rest. This is the refreshing." Yet they would not.
Yeah.
They would not shema. They would not listen. So the word of the Lord will become to them what?
Just so much blah, 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 blah.
Just
blah.
information.
Precept upon precept, precept upon precept, line upon line, line upon line. Here a little and there a little. What is it? It's a bunch of information that I shove together that means nothing.
Right.
I'm proving a point to you that
Right.
doesn't change anything.
Right.
It's not-
It's a
it's
bunch
not
of
in your
dumb
heart. It's
information.
not in your heart.
I'm going
It's
to
just
proof
a-
text you this and proof text you that. Okay, great. Does that save me? Does that bring me from here to there? No. It just enlightens my intellect, but it doesn't change my state. Notice he says, after all this, he says, that they may go and fall backwards and be broken, ensnared, and taken. Is that positive or is that a negative?
That's negative.
That's negative. So now they think they're okay with all the information, so they don't seek help. This falling backwards refers to Sinai. When they went up to the mountain, they were supposed to, at the trunk, they were supposed to go up and encounter God. But when they hear the voice of God, they run backwards. They go backwards, not forwards. And that's what he's referring to.
Wow.
So notice he says, verse 14, "Where therefore hear the word of the Lord, you scornful men that rule this people which is in Jerusalem. Because you have said, we have made a covenant with death, and with hell we are in an agreement. So when the overwhelming scourge or the overflowing scourge shall pass through, it shall not come to us. For we have made lies our refuge, and falsehood we have hid ourselves. So we've convinced ourselves that when all hell breaks loose, I'll still be fine."
That's the whole
That's the myth.
recreate.
That's right.
Yeah.
This is the lie that I'm living under, the refuge of lies. Right? So, but he said this is the promise now about the Zion. He's going to lay a foundation stone, a sure stone, right? So in the midst of this hell, he describes this sure foundation stone, that if I trust in this sure foundation stone, I will have life. But if I don't trust in that sure foundation stone, I have nothing. I am another one of these liars playing games with reality, and I will become toast when the scourge comes. Right? Because he says in verse 17, "Judgment also I will lay to the line, and righteousness to the plumb line. Hail will sweep away the refuge of lies, and the water shall overflow your hiding place. Your covenant with death shall be disannulled, and your agreement with hell shall not stand. When the overflowing scourge shall pass through, then you shall be trodden down by it. You shall be overcome by it. From the time that it goeth forth, it shall take you. From morning by morning it shall pass over. And by day and by night it shall be a vexation." What is vexation?
This is terror.
It's a terror. It's fear.
Yeah.
If my world is falling apart, only to understand the report. For the bed is too short for men to stretch himself on, and the covering is too narrow that he cannot wrap himself. Then he describes, "For the Lord shall rise up as in Mount Perazim. He shall be wroth as in the valley of Gibeon, that he may do his work, his strange work, and to bring him past his act, his strange act." What is he talking about?
Death of the wicked.
The destruction of those people who have chosen to live outside of reality. God's not anxious to do it, but he has to give them over. Then he says, "Therefore," now verse 22, "Now therefore be not mockers, lest your bands be made more strong. For I have heard from the Lord God of hosts, a consumption." What's consumption?
Destruction.
Consume destruction.
A complete destruction. To consume is
Or God is a consuming
completely
fire.
destroy, right?
And says decisive destruction.
That's right. Notice the destruction is determined upon what? They've created this myth. They're drunk. They're not in touch with reality. They've made this covenant with death. They've lied to themselves about their condition and who they really are. And Isaiah is saying that when the overwhelming scourge comes through, everything's going to be swept away. Their lives will be swept away, and they will be exposed for who they really are. And when the world is consumed by this, they are going to be consumed along with it. Does that make sense?
Would that be considered the cares of the world? You know, the cares of life? I mean, just out of curiosity.
Whatever your
Whatever
myth is.
Okay.
Whatever.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter. If you're not built on the stone that doesn't move,
Right.
then you're on something
that's
else.
the anchor that holds.
Right.
Okay.
So then he ends at verse 23. He says, "Give ear and hear my voice. Hearken and hear my speech." So he says, God is saying at the end of this, look, I'm explaining something to you. Listen to me. Listen to what I'm saying. Did you hear what I said? Please listen. That's what he says. Like, why does God keep repeating himself?
Because we're not listening.
Because we don't get it. Right? That's why he has to say it twice. And right one after the other. It's like,
It's like a parent.
like a parent talking to a child, right?
Boy.
Yeah, I heard you. Okay. Yeah, but then how come you didn't change what you're doing? Yeah. So, does this make sense? So God is trying.
yeah.
God is desperately trying to get us to sweep away the refuge of lies, this myth that we're living in now, so that we can stand in the day when the overflowing scourge comes. That nobody that's not prepared will be able to stand. Only those people that have prepared to stand are going to stand.